screening of Black Mambas. My name is Solrun Breasen. I am the Executive Director of Reykjavik Feminist Film Festival. Thank you. So, I don't know if you heard me, but I am the Executive Director of Reykjavik Feminist Film Festival, and this screening is hosted in collaboration with Reykjavik Feminist Film Festival. So we're going to have like a panel discussion now with the director of the film, Lena Kabbe, and Chaiwe Sol, who is an activist and a teacher. So please come to the stage, Lena and Chaiwe. Or actually, we should maybe start with a brief introduction. So Lena, if you can start and then hand the mic to Chaiwe.
Just myself?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm Lena Kabbe. I'm a Germany-based filmmaker. I come from production side. Actually, I produced several feature films, and this is my first directing feature. So maybe let's pass on, and then we'll see how the conversation goes.
Thank you very much for that. I'm Chaiwe Sol, and I'm, as you said, an activist, an educator, and a teacher. And my battle living in Iceland is kind of raising awareness about minorities and feminist issues, and just kind of diversity in society and the different platforms and how things intertwine in society. So it's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, great. So to start with you, Lea, I wanted to ask you, how did you get the idea to make this film, and how did you proceed? Yeah. Why did you make this film?
I've always been very passionate about conservation and nature protection topics. So it's something I read about a lot. And the last 10 years, there've been a lot of films that I felt had a very disturbing way to talk about conservation. And originally the motivation to make this film was to criticize green militarization, for example. This phenomenon now in many African countries that there's excessive use of weapons, for example, against poaching. And in these films, and there are a lot of films about this, about anti-poaching, I felt there was always this underlying racist way to talk about it when the narrative was very quickly we have to educate local people that the animals have more value. And I felt I really want to make a film in the same setting, but something that would offer a different kind of narrative, where in the end, hopefully, people also in the global north who are very disconnected with conservation in Kruger Park, for example, that people will feel some empathy, actually, also for the poachers, where at least you will have a better understanding in the end why local people feel disconnected from the natural parks, because it is for a reason.
Can I get in on that?
Yes.
Thank you. Firstly, I just want to say thank you very much for making this film. That was amazing. It touched on so many things, and like you said, making the connection between, the connection about the disconnection between third world countries and the West. And I thought it was very strong in the beginning when the guy was talking to the Black Mambas about the importance of their work and how it affects the West. You guys have to work really hard, people have to come here, they're buying tickets, there's money involved, and then he contradicts himself later on, we have to get these poachers and stuff. It's very it's a conundrum of shit, on his part, and I had a really hard time watching him and all the other guys in this, because it all felt very culty. And groomy, everything that they said, but the hope that it somewhat gives the women, you know, being able to have a job and have something to look forward to and being able to feed your family, that's also difficult because you want to be able to have funds and to take care of your family and to live, but also the work that you're doing goes against, you know, everything that you kind of stand for and you believe in, because you go there, you know, in these gates and they're like, yeah, you know, we have to catch those guys that are poaching and doing this and doing that, and you're like, who are these people that are poaching? This is, I mean, most of the people that are poaching is for food and to feed themselves, but I mean, it's white people that are poaching, that are going from the West to go there as sport. Is that not what started this whole thing to begin with? You know, and I thought that was also very uncomfortable, how he was very proud of that exposure that it brought.
This is all a big topic, hunting and poaching, you know, this terminology, like who decides who's the hunter and who's the poacher. Because, you know, people, well, particularly like white people in South Africa, will spend hours explaining to you, you know, how hunting is so important for ecosystem and stuff like this. But the underlying thing is this political thing. Whose decision was it to name one guy with a gun a hunter and another one a poacher? And, you know, maybe just a couple of details. This park was founded like 1926 with the official aim, basically, to unite politically the white people of South Africa. You know, it is something that you can look up. It's not a secret that, you know, people of color have been excluded politically from this park. And in the process of founding the park, a lot of people were forcefully removed from these areas, and their hunting rights were revoked. You know, so they were hunters; it was their territory, and then they became poachers overnight. So just to add to what you said. You know.
And following up on that, like, what do you suggest in how to fight against climate change and wildlife poaching? You know, as something that's not portrayed in this film, and you can both, yeah.
Yeah, but I think, well, in a nutshell, you know, we also have to ask ourselves, what is environment? You know, what do we understand with environment? Maybe we should not divide so strictly, you know, animals and people. And this is like such in between the lines it is in the film, I think, that when we stop sending this message the whole time that the animals' lives are more have more value than human lives, and maybe it's a like first step of approaching this.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's also, it is important to be able to address that issue, because in a way, if we do not address that, then we're holding on to colonial ideals that existed once upon a time, which I feel that in South Africa is still like a huge thing, which is still going on, where white people are like, things should be like this. It's very segregated, and ideals like that are what hold us back. But of course, there is always a huge population of people that, you know, adhere to this kind of like thinking. So it's about kind of like, you know, not breaking, but also like educating. You know, like you come here, you build this park, you do this, but I mean, this is not money that is not going to the community. I mean, if you're going to be here, how can you really build and grow the community, not to take away from the community? And then while you're living in your community, you're talking about the people that actually own this land, and you're like, oh, they're thieves, they're doing this. That's just very, it's not a good feeling for the people that actually own the land. For me, it's just modern day slavery. Yeah. Exploitation.
So, how can we work towards true emancipation and fight the patriarchal system of the past? It's a big question.
It's a big question.
Like, I think this film like inspires ideas, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I like ambiguous films, and this is, I don't think there's one answer, but for example, with empowerment and emancipation, I think these are words that we use a lot nowadays, and we throw this sort of with everything. And with this example, for me, it was interesting to ask this question. Is this is this empowerment actually, or can we only? Is it up to ourselves actually to empower us? Can we be empowered from a third party? Actually, so I think in this situation, this is a bit of an open question to everyone, and also. Can exploitation and empowerment actually go hand in hand sometimes?
Yes.
Yeah. Or is it necessarily mutually exclusive? Because as you say, like financially, they do profit from these jobs. I mean, obviously it's not.
It's coin.
Yeah. Obviously it's not an ideal situation, and the money they get is also far from ideal. But it's their only employment opportunity. So it's not in this sense only exploitation. So it does empower them financially. And this is what makes, to me, very ambiguous, this situation. It's not only exploitation, but can these things coexist actually?
Yeah. I mean, yes, I think those things can, or sadly today do coexist. It's a little bit of like the concept of tokenism, where you want to have it, but you don't want to have it, but it is a way of progression and a way that you kind of have to move forward. And I think the next movement of making change is exactly like, films like this that do bring awareness to things that are happening in reality in South Africa, where you have women that are working and suffering, but they're making a decent form of money to be able to survive. But is there something that we as a whole bigger nation can do and like really bring awareness? So like he mentions, yes, poaching of the rhinos really put them on the map and la 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 la. Then you think, okay, can we do that with this film and flip the switch on the other perspective, where it kind of like really sheds a light on his shitty behavior and attitude of thinking as a person.
Do you think it's realistic that a black mamba will ever be in a chart of a book like this?
That a film can change it.
I mean, do you think it's realistic that a black mamba will be in charge instead of the white man?
40 years from now?
I mean, like, ever? 40 years from now?
Ever, maybe, but like generations, not soon.
I mean, I think from a realistic standpoint, you would want that. You would want it to be run by another female, that is more understanding and is more like, what 21 days make no sense. We could do a week and a week, and I feel just like women think differently towards men. And for me, I just felt like these men are really just making these women just be like slaves. It's gross, So like I said, thank you again very much for exposing this grossness, but it's also the reality that people are living, and it also just brings awareness, because there's such a movement in society today about, how people are different cultures and how people are, hierarchical, what is it? Symbolic capitalism in a sense, the different hierarchies that you have. So just, I think this film just really exposes, to some extent, how privileged white men that are in a privileged position in a third world country are capable of being able to exploit women to such a gross extent. And then there's a thing where he talks about he doesn't want them to have guns because they need to be more feminine. You're like, what the fuck? And they're out there without guns, and he's not, and the stories he's telling, it's all very, but you saw it in their faces. I think what was beautiful is you saw it in their faces that they saw through the bullshit. They're right, but they're just like, fuck, I gotta get paid. So he's there, this prime minister, my friend, and they're like, but you gotta make bank. So that is also like, it also just shows you the reality of life. We all kind of like live in this situation where you have that boss who's like this and like that, and you're like, oh, she's going at it again. But so for me, kind of, it really resonated in a lot of ways. I mean, I live here in the West, and my life is very similar, but in a very different perspective. But also as an African woman, I have been to these national parks, and so much about it. And what my different experience with the different national parks that I have seen is, at least the men that do work there, or the women that do work there, have a little bit more power. That actually they have guns. and their leaders are like, you know, a black guide and, you know, all of that. So seeing Kruger Park and knowing, you know, the history of apartheid in South Africa, it shows you just how far, you know, South Africa has not gone.
And may I add what I find particularly disturbing? You know, this situation is disturbing enough, but what is almost even more disturbing, how media in the West presents this situation. Because, you know, if you Google or like search for Black Mambas, they're quite famous. They have a lot of followers, they are very active on Instagram, and like watch what they post, watch what they do. This is I find more disturbing, and that people buy it. Yeah. Because, and it's only possible because this is the idea we want to have. That's the idea we already have, and we want to be validated in this idea. Because otherwise, no one who is capable of thinking would buy into it. Yeah, but you know, you can see it with propaganda and things happening nowadays. It's hard to have this, to tolerate this ambivalence or ambiguity. We search for this clear black and white angles, and this is something, you know, when I read articles about them, I just felt, but this is, I cannot believe that grown-ups, journalists write such kind of coverage about them. No critical thinking at all, and this is what I found incredible.
Yeah, I mean, yes. It's, I think, you know, for me as a black woman who has, you know, my feet both in the white world and the black world, it can be very, like, you know, difficult seeing things from both sides. And, you know, white society is going through a lot right now, you know, and there is a need to not want to change the certain views or perspective of generations that have been living and doing things specifically in a specific kind of way. It's kind of like trying to teach an old dog like new tricks. You know, people do not always respond well to new information, but you know what we have to keep doing is simply just putting the information out there, and hopefully it just snowballs and leads to better change. But we are definitely far away from, you know, getting there, but at least the fact that we are at a place in society where we're having these conversations, you know, you're making films about it, and art is such a beautiful platform for educating, whether it be wrong or right, but at least bringing people together to share ideas about what's right and wrong. So for me, again, you did that so beautifully. You really showcased that very well in your film.
I wanted to ask you, Lena, how did you get to know the persons in the film? Like both the white man and the black Mambas.
Yeah, so this was the most challenging part of the process. Because for me it was the film of the ladies. It's their film, but at the same time I had to, during the filming, I had to be very diplomatic with both sides. I mean, we to the logistics, we had a research trip, so we spent just a week or so almost without filming, just spend time in the communities. You have to know that they constantly have journalists filming with them the whole time. And this is usually it's a nightmare for a documentarian when people are used to cameras and start to portray themselves in a certain way. But what surprised me that the women were very eager, you know, after they got to know me and I explained what I want to do, they were very eager to work with me because these journalists, they come with a preconceived idea usually, and then they spend like 4 hours or something and they film what they already have in their head, and then they leave. So it's for the first time someone really spent time with them, and also you know, it's an observational film, which means that there was nothing that I planned in advance in the way now we do this or that. It was really spending time with them and documenting their lives. And you know, from the very beginning I told them, I want to tell your story, it's your story, so It's basically we have to work together, telling a story. And this way of work really resonates with them because they felt like they want their story to be heard and they want this perspective to be seen. As for the other parts, the managers, this was also a very disturbing part of the process because the managers never questioned for a moment that I could criticize them.
Right. That comes across in the film. That they were
so sure that I totally validate them. Because they know they've been validated their whole lives.
Right.
So they don't even know.
They have no inkling.
Like no one questions them ever.
No, I think that's a really good point that they had no sense of, like, they were very, like, secure and they were like, yeah, everything we're doing here is, like, great. And they were so convinced that you were just gonna, I don't know if they were like, you were gonna cut out the shitty stuff that they said and you were only gonna portray the good stuff.
They don't see the shitty stuff.
No, but they see this, like, yeah, they were just, like, very cocky and, like, you know, he's there shirtless and, like, smoking cigarette, you know, tobacco from Germany, drinking this rum, and like, you know, and the girls are there, like, and that crazy story about the dog. Because we saw on the wall that there were other girls that had died around, you know, but somehow he goes there and he goes, today's about the dog, and you're just like, you know, and in that moment, it also just shows you more, because they were also discussing earlier about how the whites value animals, or like the dogs more as like children, and see them more as important as the people. And then in that moment, you just see how devaluating the black person is, you know, because it's like, shy is dead, you know, there's a cigarette, it's like, what do we say about it, you know? And you're just like, I can't with this guy. I just really can't with Mr. I don't even know his name, but yes.
But you know, this is funny with the dogs, because for me it was a very important motive in the film, this obsession with dogs. Because I felt it says everything, and it's so relatable in Europe, you know, because people are crazy about their animals and pets. But what's so funny, you know, this scene where the dog is in between the dead people. There's a dog, and often I have these conversations where people are telling me, yeah, I understand why you edited that way, but actually it's totally normal. Like if you love your pet, then it's you just put it, like, oh, you know, there are always people saying, oh yeah, but like my dead dog is also like near my dead grandfather or something.
Cat.
Yeah, it's like it's totally fine. So why are you so fussy about it? But I feel like, well, overall, this picture, it's not, especially in this professional context. It's just, but I just want to say that this is also ambivalent. A lot of people feel like it's totally normal for him to be so crazy about this dog, and to have this totally, in my opinion, inappropriate conversations. But it's just I'm saying, not everyone sees it that way apparently. Yeah.
So Lena, what kind of a relationship did you develop with the women?
Well, a very, very close one. And what was interesting, there was a COVID in between. What happened was COVID. So almost a year, or like 9 months after I met them, I couldn't go there. And so we were on WhatsApp the whole time, actually. And this was, now I feel like it was crucial for the filmmaking process, because, you know, this actually, we got this really close relationship because for almost a year we were constantly communicating. And so by the time I returned there the second time, we felt like we know each other. So, and Cornelia, for example, she had a baby during this time. And you know, at some point we were like phoning each other from the hospital, and you know, and I had a baby before filming also. So like, yeah, it was also very emotional to me. And you know, it's funny how Kolile, who has 2 children, she's not the big, she doesn't have the biggest screen time, but during filming, she was to me the most emotional part of the film because I also had a baby. You know, so these things, it was, yeah, I mean, it's this documentary work. It's very tricky from the ethical point of view because you develop this relationship and I mean, we are still in contact, yeah, a lot. And at some point there's this, you have to set the boundaries and, you know, and also it's very important to me, it was very challenging to sort of not to reproduce this white saviorism thing, like, oh, it's so awful here, I will, you know, change to be realistic about, like, it's their lives, they're aware of everything that's happening, they don't need me to save them. But at the same time, it was hard, you know, to watch this, how they're treated, you know, to watch this dynamics and to be neutral observer. You know, to stay there with a camera, and when things, you know, for a documentary, like this is a conflict because when you shoot a documentary, when things get uncomfortable, that's great for the film. But you know, when you develop a friendship and relationship, when things get uncomfortable, you feel, you know, obviously, yeah, you want to stop filming. So, but you shouldn't as a filmmaker. So, yeah, this is tough.
But you observed them for like a long time, like 2.5 years. So you saw them develop. Like, how did they develop over this time?
Well, it was especially with Naledi, who started. Yeah, that was very interesting to see how it developed with her. She was 19 in the very beginning. Yeah, and this was with her very striking, of course, because she was really so excited about this opportunity in the beginning. And then by the end, yeah, you know, as a critically thinking person, she obviously saw it quite quickly. Yeah, yeah. But in the beginning, because it's just these communities, they do not have that many employment opportunities. It's just the reality. But at the same time, I don't know if it was clear from the film. There's also a very different financial situation between these communities. Because this Hluvukani village is really, you know, there's nothing there. Yeah, where Kolile and Nkateko come from, but Palaborva, where Naledi comes from, there's a mine, and you know, people, you see there's a tremendous difference in the way people live. And so for Naledi, there was this huge factor that she didn't want to do, you know, because her mother works at the mine, so she doesn't have this poverty actually in the family, but she just wanted to emancipate herself from her environment. But then, yeah, of course, she was a bit disappointed. But she's tough. She's still there, and she got. There was a coincidental positive impact of the film on the ladies because they all got promoted. Yeah, after the managers saw the film, I think they wanted to protect themselves so they don't get bad publicity. So they promoted them. So you know, if someone says, "Oh, you don't treat them well," no, we do. They all promoted. Yeah. Yeah, so, and now Naledi, she said me a couple of days ago, actually, she's now going to some management course, you know, so yeah, so it's really, looks really good for her.
So you did do something positive.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. That's amazing.
I was so relieved, because, you know, with film like this, at some point, again, there's this ethical dilemma. Even in the editing, I did have to be a bit careful for in the editing. I did have these limitations because I could not, you know, I had a much more explicit scenes where the ladies, also because if you notice, there's not a single scene where ladies criticize them. That really a bit, but not so explicit. And this was something to protect them.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So I was very relieved that it all ended up actually positively for them.
Okay, so I wanted to actually invite the audience to ask you questions. If you have any, please.
I have I'm just curious. Hi, thank you both, and thank you for the film. I'm just curious, because when you see the film and you see these two white guys, the managers, and how how they're not seeing the things, but maybe they're in the environment and they're used to it, like you said, they're not scrutinizing themselves, but afterwards, when have they seen the film, and what were their, what did they say?
Actually, we always underestimate how people love seeing themselves on camera. This is so crazy, and this is not the first time I'm amazed how people just enjoy watching themselves. And so, because I had the immediate reaction, and the immediate reaction was very positive actually. But then they started to think and thought, oh, that's actually not that good for us. But the beginning, and I made a screenshots of this immediately, because I was so paranoid there will be some legal process, something. And so I made a screenshot, because they were all like, oh, it's actually very truthful, and it's true. Like, yes, that's
Yes,
very
yeah,
good.
that's my point.
No, because for Craig, I feel like he's depicted in a very sympathetic way from my side. I feel like there's, I could have edited in a much worse way. That's for sure.
I think you did good. You did.